In November 12th's edition of Under the Radar, I mentioned the story of Lindsay Shepard, a 22-year-old graduate student who is, at least for the time being, a teaching assistant at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. You may recall she was hauled in by her superiors to answer for the crime of showing a Jordan Peterson video in her Canadian Communication in Context class. In fact, it was described by Shepard's superiors as it was basically like neutrally playing a speech by Hitler. Of course, that's an absurd characterisation, but one that isn't surprising given the penchant for social justice types to label anyone that doesn't adhere to their brand of political correctness. And I don't think it's controversial to say that these kinds of views are commonplace all over university campuses in the Western world, especially in the humanities. So why then has this story received so much attention? Well, because Lindsay Shepard had the foresight to record the interrogation with her superiors, and that recording has now made its way out into the public arena. So let's have a listen to some of that recording.
Might have been seen as problematic by some of the students, maybe even threatening.
I don't see how someone would rationally think it was threatening. I could see how it might challenge their existing ideas, but for me, that's the spirit of the university, is challenging ideas that you already have. And I don't know who this came from. I would be interested to see the original complaint or complaints because, I don't really have any context, as to what exactly their problem was.
Sorry, can I?
The thing is, can you shield people from those ideas? Am I supposed to comfort them and make sure that they are insulated away from this? Is that what the point of this is? Because to me, that is so against what a university is about. So against it. I was not taking sides. I was presenting both arguments.
Now, I think most of you listening would agree that Shepard is right when she says that shielding students from ideas is antithetical to what a university is all about. But as Jordan Peterson himself has said recently, that's actually a mistake. That's what universities used to be about, but not anymore. It seems the central mission of universities is now to protect students from anything that they might deem harmful or offensive. Yes, we're all for exposing students to ideas, but only those that have been pre-approved by a hive mind of ideologues.
So the thing is about this is, if you're presenting something like this, you have to think about the kind of teaching climate that you're creating. And this is actually, these arguments are counter to the Canadian Human Rights Code. Ever since, and I know that you talked about C-16, ever since this passed, it is discriminatory to be targeting someone due to their gender identity or gender expression. So bringing something like that up in class, not critically, and I understand that you're trying to
It was critical. I introduced it critically.
How so?
I said, it was in the spirit of debate.
Okay, in the spirit of the debate is slightly different than being okay, this is a problematic idea that we want to unpack.
But that's taking sides.
Yes.
It's taking sides for me to be oh, look at this guy. Everything that comes out of his mouth is BS, but we're going to watch anyway.
Okay. So I understand the position that you're coming from and your positionality, but the reality is that it has created a toxic climate for some of the students.
How many?
It's great that...
Ooh, how many?
Okay.
One?
May I speak?
I have no concept of how many people complained, what their complaint was. You haven't showed me the complaint.
Now, I hate to reduce this to a level of a meme, but the crux of the argument from this faculty member is, but my feelings. Some number of students that even Shepard is not allowed to know complained, and therefore she has created a toxic environment for those unknown number of students. And so again, the priority is making every student feel comfortable rather than exposing them to a variety of viewpoints. Also in that segment, you heard that since the passage of Bill C-16, it is illegal to target someone due to their gender identity or gender expression. Now, the nefarious video clip that Shepard showed came from the publicly funded TV Ontario show The Agenda, hosted by Steve Paikin. Now, I'm not going to replay any part of that clip. It's an hour long, and TVO copyrights everything, but you can watch the video I did on it last year or just go to the source. Anyway, as I said, it was broadcast on Canadian public television, and Peterson doesn't target anyone. Peterson's concern in that entire show is the same as it has always been, that the government was going to compel citizens to use certain pronouns or they could run afoul of the law. For Peterson, it is more of a free speech issue than gendered pronouns. In fact, the most egregious claim in that entire show was from the adjunct professor of gender studies, Nicholas Matt, who made the startling statement that there is no such thing as biological sex. If you only watch that show for one thing, it should be that. Anyway, back to the audio.
Yes, I understand that this is upsetting, but there's also confidentiality matters.
The number of people is confidential?
Yes.
Okay.
Is one or multiple students who've come forward saying that this is something that they were concerned about and that it made them uncomfortable. You're perfectly welcome to your own opinions, but when you're bringing it into the context of the classroom, that can become problematic. And that can become something that creates an unsafe learning environment for students.
But when they leave the university, they're going to be exposed to these ideas. So I don't see how I'm doing a disservice to the class by exposing them to ideas that are really out there. And I'm sorry I'm crying. I'm stressed out because this to me is so wrong. It's so wrong.
Can I mention the gendered violence, gendered and sexual violence policy?
Yeah, please.
So under that, gendered violence doesn't just include sexual violence, but it also includes targeting folks based on gender. So that includes transphobia, biphobia, homophobia. All those sorts of things are protected under the policy, and so those are things that Laurier has upheld as values as well as the Ontario Human Rights Code. And so those are things that we're responsible for not impacting our students in that way, and not spreading transphobia in that way.
Okay, so what I have a problem with is I didn't target anybody. Who did I target?
Trans folks.
How? By telling them ideas that are really out there? By telling them that? By telling them? Really?
It's not just telling them in legitimizing this as a valid perspective, as this is another valid perspective.
In a university, all perspectives are valid.
That's not necessarily true, Lindsay.
Well, this is something that's being debated in current society, and I don't feel the need to shield people from what's going on in society. Like,
okay.
To imagine that this is happening in university, it's just bad.
Well, you heard it from the horse's mouth, folks. Not all perspectives are valid. Now, most of us would probably agree that not all perspectives are equally valid. Some perspectives are more valid because they're buttressed by evidence and sound argument, and others are not. But in this context, if your perspective is not the prescribed one, it's forbidden. But whether a perspective is more valid than another, the idea of a university is that they should all be allowed to be heard. And the part about Shepard violating the gendered and sexual violence policy. Look, the moment you conflate opinions or ideas with violence, you lose all credibility. You're off the island. The irony is, as you find out later, Shepard actually disagrees with Peterson on the pronoun issue, but by presenting something neutrally, she's not ideologically pure enough, and so she must be re-educated.
Okay, so just to give you a context, also within all of this that is happening, Laurier's being blanketed with white supremacist posters currently. There's another debate in society, which is whether or not North America should be a set of white nationalist states and that it should be ethnically cleansed of other people. That is also a current debate in society. Would you show something in your tutorial that you had, white supremacists and non-white supremacists debating whether or not other people should live in North America? Is that something that you would show?
If that was related to the content of the week and we were talking about right-wing speech bubbles, maybe.
Okay.
It depends on the content. If there's really ideas that are existing out there like that, then, look, the thing is, I don't see what's transphobic about showing a video of Jordan Peterson. He's a real person. He's out there.
He is a real person, but he is a real person who has engaged in targeted behavior that or targeting of trans students in a particular, like basically doxing them, if you know the term, like giving out their personal information so that they will be attacked, harassed, so that death threats will find them. This is something that he has done to his own students. He has done to other students. And this is also something that the students are aware of. So this is basically like playing, not to kind of do the thing where everything is kind of compared to Hitler, but this is like neutrally playing a speech by Hitler or Milo Yiannopoulos from Gamergate. This is the kind of thing that departmentally, in terms of like critical communication studies and in terms of the course of what we're trying to do, is diametrically opposed to everything that we've been talking about in the lectures.
Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and I think this is the most revealing part. First, the claims about Peterson doxing his own students I find highly spurious. I'd like to hear what Peterson has to say about that. And I wasn't aware that ethnically cleansing North America was being publicly debated. But even if it were, as Shepard says, if that were relevant to the subject matter of the class, then why not discuss it? Now, the most hilarious part is where he stops himself before making the Hitler comparison as though he's aware that it's ridiculous, but then he goes ahead and makes the comparison anyway, and then lumps Milo talking about Gamergate in as well. Now, the last part is the most revealing, and admittedly, I missed it until I read this article on Quillette. First, let's listen to it again.
This is the kind of thing that departmentally, in terms of like critical communication studies and in terms of the course of what we're trying to do, is diametrically opposed to everything that we've been talking about in the lectures.
Notice he says critical communication studies, but critical is not used in the sense that most people understand it. It's used in the postmodernist Marcuse sense. As the article puts it, notice the distinction drawn between the course critical communication studies and neutrality. They are diametrically opposed. This is not a slip of the tongue, despite the meaning most people attach to the term critical. Critical theory's defining feature is that it articulates an explicit purpose for itself, to liberate people from oppression. So, of course, the use of the term critical is misleading. The idea is to criticize power structures within the context of liberating people from their oppression. The purpose itself is above criticism, which is why situations like Shepard's arise. The article goes on to state, Marcuse's model of society, of course, follows his view of science, and his view is top-down. For him, the desired end state of society is defined in advance, so there is little need to listen to what people have to say. He can evaluate every person or movement on whether or not they are perceived to be working towards or away from his end goal, and promote or censor them accordingly. So, in other words, Shepard, by presenting the video about pronoun usage neutrally, has wandered off the reservation and away from the primary goal of liberating the oppressed. Now, I've only played half of a 9-minute excerpt. The full 42-minute audio is available online, and I'll put a link to it in the comments. There's all kinds of bizarre claims and weird tangents in there. At one point, they impugn Jordan Peterson's credentials to talk about these issues, and then make a comparison to Charles Murray claiming white people are superior, which only tells me that they've never actually read the bell curve. I think if the claims in this conversation had been uttered in a public setting, there'd be grounds for all kinds of defamation suits. Sam Harris summed up my thoughts about this interrogation session quite well with this tweet. Now, apart from the media attention, another upside is that it encourages other academics to come out of their hiding places. Here's an associate professor from Laurier University.
It seems that if you don't meet their ideology, then they're going to cut you loose. You're not part of their diversity. Diversity of ideas is not what they support.
Are you surprised? Were you stunned when you heard about this story originally?
I was shocked. I was shocked that it was so blatant. I was shocked that Lindsay had the fortitude and the smarts to actually record what was going on, because people wouldn't believe it other than that. If we as a university really believed in free speech, and if we'd been underlining that all the way along, this wouldn't have been an issue. But increasingly, here at Laurier and at other universities, we are censoring students, we are censoring faculty who don't meet the party line in terms of a particular ideology.
Are you worried about speaking out yourself, supporting her? There's only 4 or 5 that have actually called her.
Somebody's got to stand up for these people. Somebody's got to stand up for themselves. And if we don't start speaking up, we're going to eventually lose the institutions completely to an ideology and to indoctrination. And that can't happen. It's completely inappropriate that they compared her to Hitler. Because here's the idea. I see increasingly many of my colleagues using those kind of dramatic comparisons to Hitler, to other totalitarian regimes, but they do it in order to silence others. They use this label so that they don't have to come up with facts that are better. And the other thing is, if you call somebody Hitler, then it leaves the impression that you should do to these people what you should do to Hitler. It's really escalating the situation to a point where it's dangerous.
Now, Laurier University has issued an official apology, and the professor that made the Hitler analogy, Nathan Rambukkana, has also apologised in an open letter. However, I think Lindsay Shepard's tweet summed up the sincerity of that apology. Moral of the story, a university must be repeatedly publicly shamed internationally in order to apologise. Oh, but keep the task force and investigation, even then ambiguous about free speech. Also, make sure to secretly record all meetings or they won't take you seriously. And not only that, according to this article, some angry alumni said they would stop donating to the university because of the treatment of Shepard. But what will be the end result? The professors will presumably stay where they are and continue to deliver their postmodernist indoctrination, and the university will continue to look the other way unless their funding really is under threat. Will the gendered and sexual violence policy be revised to omit ideas and opinions? Will students be encouraged to toughen up and be more receptive to ideas they find uncomfortable? I wouldn't hold my breath. So how many more Lindsay Shepards is it going to take to restore some sanity to universities? As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.